Today I want to talk to you about bridging the gap. How many of you still work where you get a paycheck every week, or can remember those days when you got it? And how many of you go to church? Everybody, because you're here. I want to talk to you about bridging the gap between our physical world and our spiritual world. When you go to work, there were certain guidelines that you had to follow. You had to make sure you showed up on time. Many of us, we had to be dressed appropriately for that. Some of us had to punch a time clock. There were certain things that you had to do for your job. Now, when you were in the throes of your job, were you thinking about church? Probably not, because you had to be focused on your physical world. When you were younger, perhaps some of you went to church on a regular basis. I did. I actually went to a Christian school, so I had church quite often. And when I was in the church setting, and I'm sure when you're here in your church setting, that you weren't thinking about your job. Well, hopefully not. You see, we were focused where we needed to be focused. And the confusion comes in when we're working because we feel like we're a physical being here and we have a job to do. And we try to integrate our spirituality in that job. However, we as spiritualists know that we are spirit beings first, having a human or physical experience. And how lucky we are to have those tools that we can use. And I want to talk to you about 3 areas that we use in congruence with our physical and spiritual aspects of life. The first one is protection. We learned at a very young age that if you put your hand on a hot stove, you'll get burned. And how many of you remember, look both ways before you cross the street, because you don't want to get hit by a car. Or if something's coming at you, you know to block. When we're driving our cars, don't we have to use that self and make sure that we're protected and not hit by someone else? You see, we use protection in our physical life. Some of us have had a very difficult childhood, and we've learned how to protect ourselves emotionally and mentally. So our physical protection runs throughout our life. What about your spiritual protection? Now, some of you who are newer to the religion have always thought, oh, well, I can't really tell anybody. They'll think I'm nuts. However, it is more being accepted throughout society with our TV programs and such. So we are able to open up a little bit. And remember the 2 things they said you were never ever supposed to talk about, politics and religion? Of course, everybody's talking about politics now, aren't they? With our economy. So we learned that protection. We learned not to say things. Sometimes if you knew somebody was in a bad mood, like your boss was in a bad mood, you learned, ooh, got to stay away. And we've integrated that protection throughout our whole life. Is it bad? No. It's actually part of our survival. To protect ourselves, to protect our physical being. We see it in the animal kingdom. The only problem comes when you live in that protection mode. Because that is a fear-based status from which you live your life. And what does fear do? It stifles you, keeps you from moving forward, keeps you from experiencing more. In spirituality, those of you who have taken classes through our church will know that we learn that we need to protect ourselves when we do our meditation. What do? We ask for the highest and the best to come forward. We ask a beautiful white light to surround us in our healing. And when we do our mediumship. So we integrate. Do you see how you integrate your physical protection and your spiritual protection? And we can combine these. We can combine these in our life. But not only in protection, but the second part is practice and training. How many of you eventually learn to walk? We learn to feed ourselves. We learn to talk. And what would happen if when we were trying to walk on our first little steps and we stumbled and our parents just said, well, the child's just not ambulatory. Thank God it didn't happen. But it took us practice. And it took us some falls and some bumps and some bruises and cuts. But we learned. We learned how to do those things for our job that we needed to do. How many of you remember your first time in a new job? So frightened. You wanted to protect your job. You wanted to make sure you did everything right, but you knew, and hopefully your bosses knew, that it would take some time for you to be able to get the job down pat so that you could do it in your sleep. Some of us do in our sleep too. How many of you are right-handed? You think that came through practice? Many times, and I actually had a friend who told me this, that she started at one point in time writing with her left hand, and her parents said, no, write with your right hand. So we've trained and practiced our physical bodies, have we not? I mean, even down to the tiniest detail. Brushing your teeth, getting dressed. What happens when you can't use your right hand anymore? In stroke victims, we see that quite frequently. I'm a nurse, and I do a lot of rehab and teaching for stroke victims. And some of them are so used to using their right hand that they can't use their left hand. And they have to do everything with their left hand. Feed themselves, dress, shower, and other things. But with training, they do it. Some people have to learn how to speak all over again. Why do you think that works so well? Because we work at it, we train it. We are spirit beings first. And the spirit of who we are brings us through that. I can tell you from experience that I have seen people with the same exact history and the same exact medical problems that go wrong, for instance, stroke. One person will learn how to do it, and the other won't.